All right, welcome back. We are COMP397 in the winter 2020 semester at Centennial, and it's week 8, part 2 of our broadcast, and we're going to continue with MailPilot from last time. All right, a couple of administrative issues like we talked about before, a couple things that are due tomorrow. One thing is your alpha release, which is due tomorrow night at midnight. That's Sunday, March 8th. On that, remember that there is also tonight, we are leaping forward an hour or two after 1 o'clock, 1 hour after 2 o'clock. I mean, that's what I meant to say, because we have that daylight savings time, if I'm not wrong, tonight at 2 o'clock, right? So that means the clocks are going to go forward. You're going to lose an hour, right? Leap forward or spring forward, fall back, right? There we go. So it's happening, and you also have your peer review, which is also due tomorrow night at midnight. So peer review is individual. Please make sure you get that done. And your alpha is team. Please make sure you have that in for tomorrow night at midnight. Okay, so we left off in our adventure, in this coding adventure. We had a lesson 6, and I made a new lesson called 8C. Here it is. So I'm just gonna make this lesson come up, and you can see I've been doing some drawing with this one. 8C. Sure. Okay, so there's our lesson 8C, and I'm just going to do the same things I always do, which is I don't have a remote, so you can see that there's no remote. I've removed it for now, and I want to make a new GitHub repo. So again, I'm going to go to GitHub. I'm going to go to Centennial College, and under Centennial College, make a new repo, COMP397 in the winter 2020 semester, and it's lesson 8C. Okay, there we go. I need these last 2 lines of code right here, these ones, and I'm going to go back to my code here and right click and paste, enter, and then now that's the live repo. So for people who want to find it online, again, what I'm going to do is on eCentennial, I'm going to grab this stuff, right? And I'm going to go to eCentennial and add a new link to GitHub. So this is the week 8 GitHub link. Okay. There it is. Okay, week 8. You're good to go. So you can always get it from there. So please, if you want to follow along, download this file with me, work with me on this one, and we'll move forward. So what is this file? What are we doing? Where did we leave off last time? Again, what I want to do is I want to press Control-Shift-B to build. So I'm going to use the watch task to build this new game, some cross or transpiling from TypeScript to JavaScript here. And then I'm going to use light-server to show off my files. So this is where I'm at right now. Okay, and you can see that I've got a bit of movement from right to left. There's a bit of smooth movement that I've got from my ship. It follows my mouse, but not exactly where my mouse is. There's a bit of a lag, a delay, right? And you can see that this will help me move my ship around. So I've got my flowing ocean and my ship moving right and left. What I want to do today is 2 things. One, I want to add an island, and I want to add a cloud, and I'm going to do some simple collision detection, all right, to help you with your assignments 2, as well as your release that's due tomorrow. Okay. I also want to talk about function and constructor overloading, which is how do we do that in JavaScript? That's more of a complex topic to kind of cover. Okay. First things first, I want to think about, I'll take a different approach than I did last time. Before we make anything, I want to think about this. So far what we have is we have a game object, Superclass. And my game object Superclass right now, it does this. In my constructor function, let me go to my constructor function. It requires an image string, and the image string is an object which is of type, we look at config game assets. Remember we had this in our config file. So in our config, we have a game.ts file, and it gives us some information. One of them that's common is this thing called assets, and assets is a load queue. In our game.ts file, which is here, game.ts, I have an asset manifest, and I load all my stuff through my load queue, and I save a reference to them in my config.game.assets. That's where it's stored, right? So it's kind of like a global reference where I can get to my assets anytime I want, from anywhere I want, okay? But these assets are the ones that I've loaded so far, okay? Why am I telling you this? Because we got some things we can change at this point. So right now, when I do this, I only have one way of doing it, and I have my X and Y is always going to be, I mean, I have to enter an X and Y or nothing. That's my option right now, okay? But what about if I wanted to pass, instead of an X and Y, what if I wanted to pass a vector 2? Maybe I can do either a vector 2 or an X and Y. On a vector 2, vector 2s are interesting because a vector 2 takes X and Y. But what about for a vector 2 if I wanted to give it an array? Square brackets, some array, like a configuration, a two-dimensional or one-dimensional array, or 0, 1, or whatever it's going to be. I want to give it an array. So I can start with my vector 2. What if I wanted to do this? What if I wanted to give my vector 2, right, in my constructor, instead of giving it X and Y coordinates, I wanted to give it an array. And from the array, I can get my X and Y coordinates. Furthermore, what if I wanted to give my constructor an object, a parameter, a bunch of parameters, right? How would I do that? Well, it comes back to doing something called function overloading. So we can do this with TypeScript. Let's go up to typescriptlang.org together and play a little bit before we start. So here's typescriptlang.org. I want to go to my playground, and I want to talk about this new structure. So let's suppose, right, that I want to make this vector class happen, okay? And I want to make my own simple vector here again. So I have a vector 2, so class vector 2. There's my vector 2, right? And in my vector 2 class, I have a couple of properties. I have a x, which is a number, and let's make this private, right? And I also have private y underscore y, which is also a number, right? And I have some getters and setters for x and y. So I have get x by itself, and x is going to return a number, right? And I can say that return this dot underscore x, right? And then here's my setter, so set x, so new x, which is a number, and then I can say that this dot x is equal to new x, right? These are things I can do, and let's just do the same thing for y. So I'm just making a simple vector that takes x and y coordinates, y, 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 and y. Let's make it so that it's y proper. Yeah. Okay, so this makes sense. So I can have this, right? And let's just turn off my config. Let's not use strict null checks so we don't have that error come up. All right, and let's make a constructor, right? Constructor. We're going to have two options. One is to take x and y coordinates, x, which is a number, which is going to be equal to 0. So this is an optional. And then y, which is a number, which is also going to be equal to 0, right? X and y. And I can say this dot x is equal to x, and this dot y is equal to y. And you can see that this is what it's going to look like in the final version. Okay. But what if I don't want to take x and y? Like I said, I want to take an array. How do I do that? Well, you can use another constructor line. So what you can do is I can have two options. I can say that I want to take this, or I want to do another constructor, and I want to have an array. Let's call it coordinates, right? My coordinates array is going to be an array of type number, right? So number array. Immediately we're going to get this error that says the first one, it says that the overload signature is not compatible with this implementation signature, right? So how do we overcome this? Well, we can say that we can make a final base case, and the base case will look something like this. I have two values. My first value which is a number, and my second value, which is a number, let's just say. Okay? In my first numbers case, right, my first number, let's make it a number or a number array. So we'll say it's a number array, or we're using the pipe character, or it's a number or a number array. We're going to say that this is equal to 0. We can't do the equaling to 0 up here, okay? Can't do this. We can say that this is equal to 0. Okay? Clear? So what we're saying here is this. We're saying we have 3 lines. The first one is x and y. The second one is coordinates. And we have 2 arguments, really. We have the first argument, which could be an x or coordinates, and the second argument, which can be y or nothing, right? Which means that these things can be optional, right? These can be optional. We can pick the question mark in there to make it optional. The coordinates would not be optional. You have to put in a coordinate system in there, right? And what we can say is now there's no more x's and y's. It's either first or second. This last line tells us what these new variables are going to be, right? So let's suppose that this is going to be first, and this is going to be second. However, we have a bit of a problem. First can be either a number or a number array. So the only time we want to do this is when first is a number. So we can do this. We can say that, hey, if type of first is equal to number, right? If the type that I'm looking at is a number, then I want to say that this is the thing we want to do. Okay? This is what we want to do when first is a number. How about, though, when first is not a number and when first is a number array? And we can do an explicit check. If, and then type of, and notice if I say first, and if I want to control space is equal to control space, these are the things you can ask for. Is it a big int, a boolean, a function, a number, an object, kind of an object, a string, a symbol, or undefined, right? Or you can say that if first instance of array, right, if it's an array, which it would be, then this dot underscore x is equal to first 0, right? And this dot underscore y is equal to first 1, right? So depending on what I get, if it's a number, I'm going to do this. If it's a, if the first argument is an array, I'm going to do this.
Are you assuming that number has only 2 values?
Number is only going to have, I mean, this number here, this first, is only going to have 2 values. That's the assumption. Again, you can check it. You can do a type check. You can say that, hey, is my array, if my array is greater than 2, I don't care. Actually, I really don't care. If it has 10 values, I only care about the first 2 anyway. Just ignore the other ones, right? As long as it's an array, as a number array, I'll accept it, but I'm only going to care about the first 2 values, right? Does this make sense to you? It works, actually. If you look at the JavaScript side, this is a JavaScript implementation. It's totally fine. So how do you prove this? Well, let's try this out. So I can say like let, position, right, be equal to a new vector2 object, and I pass in a number x and y. Let's say 10 and 20, and let's just output that position. So I can say, and let's produce a little method, a toString method. So public toString, and the public toString method is going to return a string where we print out the array. We can say that, or print out the contents of our vector. So we can say that return, open bracket, and let's say we're going to add in, actually let's use a template string, which is better. Template string looks like this. We can say $ curly brace, this dot x, right? And then $ curly brace, this dot y. And then what we can do is we can add stuff around it, like a bracket and a bracket. This is a template. and then we can add a comma. So it's going to look just like this when it prints out. Okay, template string. So I can say that, let's do that. We'll say position dot toString, right, is what I want to do. And I want to console log that. Console log position dot toString. Okay, there we go. And let's run this thing. So I'll run it, and let's see what it looks like in the console. So you can see in the console, it gives me 1020. Right? 1020. 1020 is what I assigned to it. It gives me 1020. Right? What about if I assigned, instead of this, I assigned an array. So let's say I want to make an array. Let's say coords is equal to an array of 2 coordinates, 10, and let's make it 20 and 30. That's my coordinates. And I want to pass in an array of chords. Can I do that instead? And if I save it and I run it, you can see now it's 2030. So it takes either one, an array, or it takes a x and y coordinate. Hey, let's make it one more. Let's do, because I'm a little crazy, right? What about if not only does it take a number or coordinates, but it also takes another array, another vector, like this. Constructor. It also has a vector, right, which is of type vector2. Can I do this? I mean, I'm defining it in my class itself. So now it can be a number. It can be a number which is equal to 0, or it can be a vector2. Let's put another and in there. So we'll say or, undo. We'll say that pipe character means or. It's of type vector2. Okay, that's the other type. So first number, or it's either a number, a vector2, or a number array, a vector2, or a regular number. Okay. If, here's how you do it. If first instance of, right, vector2, that's the other option. Then we can say that this dot x is, actually we just can say, we want to make it so that this dot x is equal to vector2 dot x, which is first dot x. And this dot y is equal to first dot y. Yeah? Copy, basically, is what we're doing, right? Does it make sense? So it's nice, right? It gives us more flexibility, right, than making a regular vector like before. And now let's try it. So we'll, instead of making coordinates like this, we'll make it so that it is let old position. We'll have it. Wait, let's say we had an old position. Was it a new vector2 object, right? So let's say the position was like 20 and 50, right? And we're going to pass in this vector2 inside here, old position, and we should be able to say that new position is equal to old position, right? So save it, and we'll run it, and we'll look at it like so. So we should see 2050, right? 2050. So it works too, right? So why bother doing this stuff, right? Really big one is flexibility. If I can overload my functionality, I can have my constructor be more robust. I can do more things with it, right? And it gives me flexibility in terms of the way I do my mathematical calculations. In the future, we're going to do more mathy stuff, right? We're going to have more options, and I want to have this kind of flexibility. And also, I want you to think of it this way. If I say that let another position is equal to a new vector2, take a look at the code hinting I'm getting now. If I open this up, I get one of 3 type of constructor signatures I can use. I can use this one, or I can use this one, or I can use this one. It takes all 3, and it tells you what it takes, just like normal C#. Okay, nice. I like it, right? So really, really powerful. Why am I showing you this? It's not just for game dev, because you're using TypeScript. You're going to learn, maybe probably use TypeScript again somewhere else. This is another feature of TypeScript that I'm going into, right? Which I think is a very important feature these days. Okay, let's take a look at how we can incorporate this change. We kind of have the way, a map to do this. How can we incorporate this change into our code? So again, going back to our code now, let's do it. So similarly to what we did here, now we have one wrinkle on our code, we have first parameter, second parameter, and a third parameter. And the third parameter is a display object. We did this because we want to capture the x and y coordinates of the display object, whatever that is, whenever we update our regular code, right? Remember, we said that if we set a new x and if the display object is not equal to undefined, so we have a display object defined, then we also want to take the x coordinate of the display object and update it with the x coordinate of this vector, right? And usually this is really great when it comes to position vectors. So if I have a position vector connected to a game object, then when the position vector changes, the game object x and y changes too. That's what this does, okay? We have to be careful about this because now when we start monkeying with our vector, it's going to be slightly different for everything else. Okay, so let's try this out. So again, I'm going to do some copy pasting actually. I just did some of this work. I want coordinates, I want a vector, right? And I want this first, second, but we also have something called third, right? So let's copy these three constructor signatures right here. And we're going to put them underneath this one. Okay, here we go. One thing to note is we can't do this anymore, right? So this is not doable. We can't do this. Can't do this, right? We can only do this down here, right, at this first level. First, second, and we also have third. And third is going to be display object, this one. Now we can make as many of these as we want. Notice that coordinates now doesn't make any sense, right? It says that overload signature is not compatible with implementation signature. Why is that? It needs a number array. Well, I've kind of given a number array to it. So what? Huh? Why? These ones are definitely optional. So this one is optional. So these have to be this now. That is for sure. But why this? Why is this causing a bit of an issue where before it wasn't, right? I know that coordinates is here, vectors here, but why this? Look, I have a number. Here's my number array. Here's my vector, and here's my class. Here's my number, right? So that's all good. It should totally work, right? Anybody have an idea? Well, there's a couple of things here. So notice that display object is not equal to 0. That can't work anymore because there is no display object. That's up here, right? This is what it's really called now. It's called third, right? Okay, so that's what that's called. First and second is x and y, so we have to modify this again. So first and second, let's modify those two things. So this is second, right? And we can say that exactly what we did in our code here, which we want all of this. This is actually really, we already written this stuff, so it totally works. Notice that we would put all this in here because that makes sense. So we kind of put all that in there. This is all doable, right? What about third? How come it's giving me this funky thing? There is no option to make this an optional. It's got to be what it's got to be, right? So here's undefined. Here's my array. We know this is an array. This is this part. And I've got this number array. So why isn't this happening? Anybody? Well, if I took this out for a second, so if I just commented this part out, you can see that now it's going to have the same problem here. Vector, and it's vector 2, and whatever, right? So why is that? In fact, it shouldn't give you an error at all, right? Because this part right here, it satisfies the requirement. But we do have this third argument, right? We do have this third argument. The first argument cannot be all optional. It cannot, because number, if you don't give it a number, or if you don't give it a vector, or whatever it's going to be, right? Like for example, maybe what it's looking for is this, right? So I don't want to give it a vector, or maybe it's not liking this part, right? Notice that that went away. When I put this back, I put it back, right? Well, because, let me just put this back. Because this is actually optional, right? Because this was optional, right? If I didn't put this as optional, then this would be required, and this doesn't match the signature. That's why it's having this problem. Okay? So now it's back to normal. Now it's okay. So question, would it be optional to put an array? What if I didn't have anything in there? Could I set up default numbers in here for my array or my vector or my number? And the answer is, I haven't seen a way of doing that. I haven't seen a way of initializing my array to like some value, like to do this. You know, I haven't seen a way of doing that kind of stuff at all. You see, it gives me an error. It says type number is not assignable to type number array, right? It just doesn't do it. Once I assign something, it kind of makes it so that it's the last thing that gets assigned. And I can do it for the last value, right? Where number is equal to 0. I can do this here, but I can't do it for this. And putting this in brackets, if you try doing something like this, number is equal to 0, that doesn't work, right? So, you know, it's like you want to be able to do every one of these as defaults, but you can't. And you can't do that up here. You can't sit there and go, well, that's going to be equal to 0, 0. You can't do that, right? That won't allow it because it says a parameter initializer is only allowed in a function or constructor element implementation. So that doesn't allow it there, right? I'm just putting it out there to you. So you can't do it that way. Once you go down this route, there's limitations. All right, so we have this part, third, as create.js display object, right? And that's only if third is not equal to undefined. We can say that if it's not undefined, then, well, it's okay, right? First is a number, second, or first is an array, or first is a vector, then it does different things. And that satisfies most of our requirements, right? You can see that X and Y is optional, and so is display object. Coordinates are not optional. When you take this route, if you put in a square bracket thing, it's not optional. You got to put in square brackets, and neither is vector. Vector is not optional. I mean, you got to give it something, right? However, if you give it nothing, it's going to set up X and Y as 0, and this is false. So that's okay too. So it'll work. So that is our vector. Let's see if everything still works after we've done this. One thing is to do it. Another thing is to try it. So we're going to try it. And you can see that still we're pretty good to go. And also let's check to see if under the inspector, do we have any errors, which is very important to do. If no errors, then we're okay, right? Questions around overloaded constructor. We want to do one more. We want to do the game object superclass, and I'll explain why it's very important for us to do it there more than anywhere else. Well, because we want some flexibility here too. So here's game object superclass, right? And notice that right now it takes an object, right? And we have optionals for our number, X and Y, and our Boolean is false. What if I just want to give in a number, right? Like my vector here, right? As an example, I want to pass in a vector, a position vector. That makes more sense, right? So my constructor is going to look like this. I'm going to have a constructor, and just ignore the red for a second. My first argument is going to be always the same. It's going to be of type object, right? So far. And my second argument, right, it's going to be a number. And my third argument, well, that's going to be a Boolean. Okay? It's first, second, and third. However, we can't initialize like this when we do this. Remember, we can't do this kind of stuff. And I'm also going to have another constructor. This is the other option. The other option is my first, right, is going to be called image string. Again. So I want the image string, which is an object. And my second is going to be a vector 2. So we're going to call this position, which is going to be of type vector 2. So it's going to be objects.vector2. Okay? And then my third is going to be a Boolean. So we're going to say centered, which is going to be Boolean. Okay, so that's the second object. Okay, second constructor. So now, we can't do this up here, so we have to take all of this work. And by the way, so now object is still an object. The first one is always an object. You see this? Object, object. So always an object. That's not a problem. So this is okay. So we can take all this, cut it, and we'll put that in here as a default, right? And then we can't do this here, we need to do this down in here, right? So x, y, and thing. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 variables, not 3. So third, second number is this. Sorry, third is actually a number. Sorry about that. And fourth is a Boolean. There we go. Fourth is a Boolean. Okay, so that kind of satisfies this one, but it doesn't satisfy this one because object first can be an object, but second can be a position, a vector. So second can be either a number or a vector. So let's make the vector first. So vector 2 or a number. That's what second can be. A vector 2 or a number. And then third is either a number or a Boolean. So Boolean or a number. Okay? And fourth is always a Boolean. Okay, so how do I fix this so we have no errors? Well, notice that the first one is always required. I need some kind of image string. But we know that by default we're giving it an object here. So we can make that this one is optional, right? That's optional. We know that the x and y coordinates were optional from before. And my centered was also optional from before. So these are all optionals. We know that centered is going to be optional here, right? Position and object, in this case, we can make position an optional if we want to, or we can make it so that x is an optional. I'm going to make this required. So the way it works is fourth needs to be an optional here. So here, fourth needs to be an optional because, for example, we don't have a fourth parameter here in the second constructor signature. We only have 3, right? 1, 2, 3. Okay? Here, the last one is optional, but these two are required in this setting. Right? Again, if the first one is placeholder, the second one, it can be a number, which is going to be defaulted to 0. Right? We can do this. The third one is also a number, which can be defaulted to 0. Right? And the fourth one is a Boolean, which can be defaulted to false. Okay? Now, image string doesn't exist. It's called first. So first, right? That takes care of that part. And then centered, that doesn't exist. That depends. Sometimes it's the fourth argument. Sometimes it's the third argument. So we can check. We can say, okay, well, it really depends, right? So we can say if. So again, let's look at the second. So if it's the fourth one, if fourth is Boolean, if the fourth exists, if it's not undefined, right? If fourth is not equal to undefined, if the fourth exists, then we know that this is the fourth, right? We can say this is fourth, right? However, what if it is undefined, right? And we don't care about it. What if, for example, the third, 1, 2, 3, is of type Boolean? If third, so type of third is equal to Boolean. That's a thing we can do, right? We can say that if that's the case, then this dot centered is equal to third, actually, right? That's an option. These aren't x and y values, and this only happens when x is actually, the second is a number. So if type of second is equal to number, right? If I did this, then we put this one in here, right? If that's true, then I can say that, well, this one is second, this one is third, But now it's going to have a problem with third. So both the second and the third need to be a number. So we're going to say that open brackets. We'll copy this. We'll put an double ampersand sign. And we'll say if type of third is also equal to a number. So both need to be a number. And then you can see that this is also going to be functional. Right? Make sense? So we're good to go. So again, if second and third are numbers, then we're going to accept numbers, right, in my array. I can say that that's true, second and third. But remember, we also have some overloads, right? We also have some overloads here. So we could take a vector too, right? So what about if second is a vector? So if second instance of vector 2, what about if that's the case? If second is a vector, then this dot position is equal to second. Because second is a vector, and so is this one, and you can equate one to the other. Right? Make sense? So that's kind of that how it works. I think I covered everything. Third. What about fourth? If fourth exists, yeah. So this is where it becomes funky. It says parameter cannot have a question mark. Yeah, it can't, because I also have this. Right? Because I have a value. Can have a value or not. All right, so if fourth exists, then we're good. If not, then we're good. Okay? So that's the way it works. And I think this will be good. This will be okay for us. This will give us some more flexibility. I can take a vector instead of x and y coordinates. So I can go whatever I want. I can also make a parameter list. So sometimes what I want to do is I want to make a parameter list. If I have a bigger object like a game object, maybe I want to give it a parameter list. Just like they do in JavaScript. So in create.js. If I go to create.js, easel.js, docs, then I have some options when it comes to setting stuff up with my bitmap. So for example, in my bitmap class, I can give it this, right? But I can also give it a parameter list. So notice in my index, right? When it comes to my bitmap, it takes other things. Like it doesn't just take one thing. I can give it a list of things, right? A parameter list. And how does this work? So if I was to think about all the things that I can give it, let's say for example I want to make a new sprite. We're going to talk about sprites later on, right? Well, sprite has a bunch of methods. These are all the methods, right? It also has things like alpha and my current animation, my filters, and so on. But I also have the ability for me to pass in more than one piece of information at the same time. Something called I can set transform, or I can have it can return a transform matrix if I really want to. This is really quite interesting what it gives me, but I have lots of stuff I can do. And sometimes what I want to do is pass in a bunch of items all at once. It's almost like, so here's set transform. Set transform gives me whatever transformation I want, right? So imagine if I had a parameter list that I want to give it instead. So what I mean by that is I have an image string, x and y, and centered, and I want to make it so that I can give it whatever value I want. I can have an object, I can pass an object, and all I want to give it is the x coordinate. I want to pass an object, and all I want to give it is the y coordinate. Right? So how do I do that? So example would be something like, if I was going to make a new object of type game object, I can say something like, let's go back up to TypeScript playground for a second. So let's say I want to make a x and y, but I want to give it y but not x. So I want to say constructor, I want to give it y but not x. How does that work? Can I do that? Right? Well, how do I skip a parameter? How can I tell it it's y but not x? Like there's no way to do it. right? But I can produce another constructor that takes an object, right? So I could say something like, okay, well, I want a constructor, right? And in my object, let's call it params, right? My params object is actually an object that gives me x and y. So it gives me x, which is a number, right? And y, which is a number, right? I want this kind of thing, right? But really, what I want it to do is, well, params is an object, right? Params is an object. And the params object, I can just make it, I can call it an object, okay? So now it can be a number, a vector, or an object. But object is very generic. That means it covers everything. It's really like saying anything else. It's kind of weird, right? I don't like it, right? And I can't test for that. I can't sit there and go like, what if it's like this object or that object? It'll work with every time. So if I say, well, type of first is equal to, I can say object, right? Because that's an option. I can put object. But that's going to be really generic. It'll be every object will hit that one, right? Because JavaScript is object oriented in some ways, right? I could also say, well, first, instance of, and then control space. What is it an instance of? Well, is it an object? I can do capital O object, but I can also specify a type of object. For example, vector params. Vector params. So how does this work? What about if I had an interface? So interfaces work also in TypeScript. I could call this interface, I can call it vector params. Vector params. And the interface vector params takes two objects, x and y, x. And I can make it optional, x, which is a number, and y, which is a number, right? So x and y. And then one of the things that this can take instead of an object, is vector params. So vector params, right? That's something else I can take. So I can say number, vector, number, well, or vector params. Vector params, right? That's another option. So now I can check for that. I can say if my first is an instance of vector params, but the problem with this is that can I ever have an instance of a can I ever have an instance vector params? Can I ever have an instance of an interface? No. That's why this doesn't work. If I made this a class vector params, okay, then it would work. And then if I did that, I could say something like this. I could say, well, if my first is an instance of vector params, then this dot underscore x is equal to first dot x, and this dot underscore y is equal to first dot y. And what if they don't exist? Well, you can make your vector params up here. This vector params class, it's a very small class. You can make it so that they're defaulted. So you can say that they're by chance. You can make a little constructor, and you can say that they're equal to 0. So, and this is another step which makes it even more flexible. So you can say something like x, which is a number that's equal to 0, and y, which is a number is equal to 0, and then this dot x is equal to x, and this dot y is equal to y. You see that there's a default 0, 0, right? And what this would do is if you didn't put one of the parameters in, so let's say for example y was nothing, it would be 0 by default. It would always be something, first and second. And so I can pass in vector params. And what it means back down here, right, I can say, okay, let me make my parameter list. So vector params is equal to new vector params. I can make a new vector params, and I say, well, it's equal to, you know, my y. I'm going to say that it's, you know, I don't want to define my x as an example, and I just want to find my y as something else. So 0 for this, and my y is 5, and I can pass in vector params, right? Or if I don't want this to happen, let's say I don't want to have a constructor at all, and I went back to the idea that this was an interface, right? An interface of vector params, then I couldn't check for it like this. I can't go instance of vector params. Because there is no instance of vector params. The other thing is, what if I wanted to check for some kind of custom object? Like the custom object that I'm going to get is an object that has x and y, which x is a number and y, which is a number. I mean, could I do that? Is there a way of checking with this? And one of the examples that you might see online is, you know, it's an instance of an object, right? You know that it's an instance of an object for sure. Now, all of these classify as an instance of an object, right? Because I can't do this, right? I can't go through it and say, well, first is, it's a special object. It's a parameter object, a parameter list, if you will, right? That's what it is. How do I pass in this? I could make it any. So I could say, well, vector params, instead of vector params, it's just any, right? And then if I did that, if I say it's instance of, I can't say instance of any, but I can say first, if type of first is any, can I do that? No, that won't allow it either, right? Because it's vector params. Vector params is any. I could do that. Any number, blah, blah, whatever. I mean, it wouldn't work, is what I'm saying. There's no way of checking this. So let's take a look at the documentation to see what it says in terms of our overloading. So function, overloading, TypeScript, right? And I wanted to show you this. Oh, this is the wrong one. I wanted to show you this because you might think it's similar to what we've done in C# and Java, but there are limitations because at the end, underneath everything, it's still JavaScript. And so there's only so much we can do with that. And I think it's under functions. Sorry, I'm wasting my time here. We'll go to typescriptlang.org. typescriptlang.org, and we'll go to documentations, handbook, functions. Yes, pretty sure it's here. So it talks about how to do functions and types and everything else, and optional and default parameters. And then as you go towards the bottom, there is a section on overloads, all right? And it discusses this exact same thing. So here's overloads, how it's done. And we say type of x is equal to object, type of x is equal to number. And really that's all they have for us. They don't really have much else in terms of that. So there is no way you can pick that up, right? I mean, if it's a class, it's okay. But if it's a class, then, you know, I mean, how does it make any sense, right? However, if you know if it's a parameter like this, right? If we make it so that, going back to what we said before, so if I go back to this, and let's make this back into a class just for a second. So a class can have x and y coordinates, right? X and y. A vector params is here. Vector params. And this will be vector params again. Vector params. And this will be first is instance of vector params. First instance of vector params. Okay, this is okay. Right, that's okay. However, here when it comes to implementation, we wouldn't do this, right? Because that makes no sense. But instead, what you'd want to do is kind of pass in an object of type vector params. So you're going to say, okay, well, I'm passing in an object because I can do that. And I want to say that y, right, is equal to a value like 20. Can I do that? Look. So I only pass in the y value, right? Why? Because what we basically set up here is that it can, both x and y are optional, right? X and y are optional, so I can just do y, 20, right? So if that's true, then what does this end up being? So if I run this now, and if I go to console, inspect it on the console, then I get undefined, undefined. Why is that? I mean, I passed in an object. It didn't complain, right? It saw it as vector params. Look, it saw it as vector params, right? It says like, hey, y is 20. But I'm getting undefined, undefined here, right? So again, going back up, it says, okay, if it's an object of vector params and I'm passing in x and y, well then, cool, right? I'm saying that this is y and the other one is x, and I'm making an object. I'm not even using the constructor function because I don't have to, right? Then how does that work? I'm not instantiating a new object of type vector params. I'm just making it that way, right? X and y are optional. So what happened? I mean, when I came through this, it detected this. And if I do a console log for a second, console log, and this is type vector params, right? And if I run this again, did it detect that it was a vector param thing? Right? Well, it used the vector param option because if you notice down here, it says when I run over to it, it says it detects that it's of type vector params because I passed in an object. That's the closest thing it can figure out, right? How about if I pass in x and y? X is 5 and y is 20. If I did this, right? And then I run it. Still undefined, undefined. Right? X is 5, y is 20. Okay, and this is me using this. Okay, what about if I made this I put a constructor function in here. So I said, well, constructor, right? I have an empty constructor. That's all I need. And I can set, I haven't defined this before, so I save it and run it. See, same thing. I can also put in x, which is a number. I can set this to 0. And then y, which is a number, which I can set that to 0. Right? And then I can say the same thing that I did before, which is this dot x is equal to x. And we'll just do it on one line. This dot y is equal to y. And then I save that and run that. And you can see again, nothing, right? How about if I did it up here? If I said x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 0. And I got rid of all this, right? Because I don't need that. If this is 0 and 0, then I'm pretty good to go. Run. So it doesn't detect what's happening. If I just did this, x is 5 and y is 20, doesn't know what that is. It doesn't know for sure that that is of type vector params, because vector params is x and y, right? And if I was to do this, if I said let params equal to this, right? So here, and I passed in params in here, params. It's not going to complain, but when I hover over this, it says it's an object with x and y numbers, x and y. That's what it gives me, x and y. An object of type x and y. And unfortunately, I can't go through here and do that. I can't sit there and say, well, I want an object and I might take x and y. So I can't go, okay, I want an object and I'm going to get a number and I'm going to get another number. Okay? And you know what? These numbers are going to be optional. I want to get numbers that are optional. And this now up here is going to be the same thing. It's going to be an object of type x. Let's just take this whole thing. So this whole thing. So this, right? I mean, sure, I can put that in there, right? But is it going to go here? What kind of thing is this? Can I do this? Right? I mean, it doesn't detect this kind of thing, this object. I've typed this object, right? I can say that first is an instance of an object, instance of object. I can do that. But then I'm going to get this problem, right? I don't know what it is, right? Whatever this object that I'm getting is. And I can see that if I was to go down here, that if I hover over, right, here, you can see that it's params, which is an instance of an object, would totally work, right? Because it detects it, the third overload. X and Y, I'm getting these numbers, the values in here. But my challenge is that we don't know what's happening here. It doesn't give me any code hinting for this kind of thing, right? It can't. It's not like I can sit there and go, it's an instance of, or a type of. What about if I did type of? First, if first type of, same thing. If I said type of first is equal to, right, object, right? Maybe if I spell first properly, right? Again, you're going to have this issue where it's going to say, I don't understand what this X and Y is, because a generic object doesn't have X and Y. Does that make sense? There isn't anything in there that defines that, right? And if you notice that down in here, yeah, okay, I mean, sure. But one thing to note for sure is that we may never get in here. We may never get here, right? Where if this is equal to this, if first is equal to this type, right? If this is of type, custom type, we can't do that. Instance of, we can't do that, right? So that's an issue. That's a real issue. I mean, I can get the value. It can see that I can get a number or an object of type with X and Y, but there's no way of checking this. So just pointing it out there. So that is where we have limitations when it comes to what we're doing here in our game object superclass. We can do this, no problem, but I can't give it an array of stuff unless I define some kind of parameter list, and then I need to do something with that parameter list, and there's nothing I can do here in TypeScript without giving me an error, right? Now, at least not defined in the overload. Okay, nice ideas though, but we haven't done a lot already, believe it or not. Even though it looks like we're spinning our wheels and we haven't done anything, we've actually done a lot. Because what this allows us to do is be more flexible when we create our new classes. So this is a great place to put this up on GitHub. We've made some changes. We've overloaded both the game object and the vector class. And that's what I want to put up now. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go here. I'm going to basically put this to the staging area. I'm going to say overloaded vector 2 and game object. Right? So then I'm going to click this little button, which commits all, and then push. All right. So that did those changes. Again, we're still operating, so operationally, we're still good to go, right? Are we good to go? Do we have errors? I mean, that would be bad if we did, right? All right, well, let's try that out. Sorry, Control-Shift-B. Did we stop watching? Did it crash? Oh yeah, we have an error. All right, so where is this? Game object at TS12641. 126. No. Let's drop out of this task. In fact, let's just close off. Sometimes what I need to do, guys, I'm sorry to say, is especially when we make lots of changes like this, is I need to reboot up Visual Studio Code, making sure that it's working properly. Control-Shift-B, because now I can tell that it's not like an old error that I got. We should get 0 errors. Yeah, that's what I thought, right? So 0 errors, and then we'll say control, let's add light server, and see what we're getting, right? Because, you know, if we have a problem, if it doesn't light up, yeah, and it does. Okay, we're good. Sorry. Right, and check the console as well. Let's inspect the console. We can see that we're all good to go. All right, so that's the first part. Let us also, now that we've got it up on GitHub, and we can see this is the GitHub. Remember, what's the easy way to put this up on, to make it live? Do you guys remember? It's pretty simple. You go to settings, right? And you scroll all the way down to where it says GitHub pages, and you change this from none to master branch. And when it does this, it's going to take some time. But if I go back to the code, notice that I already have a .node Jekyll file, which all my files, all my templates have that now, right? So it's literally just a matter of waiting for this thing to update. Because if I go here and click this little link, you can see that you can see the build pages are here. This is where it should be, and we're live. That's all it takes. Okay, so we're live. We can see this page, and if it crashes like this, we can see why it crashes. Sometimes it'll give us errors. It'll say that, hey, something's missing, you know, whatever. We can see what is missing. It says type error, objects.plain is not a constructor, and that could be many reasons why it's like that. But I have a feeling it's because not everything is updated yet. Okay. But locally we're running great. Locally we're perfect. So here's plain. And okay, so we know the super constructor is called and everything else is okay. And we know also that plain has been added into our index.html. We know these things because this is our game objects. Here's plain and here's player. We have those in there. It's been connected, right? Plain.js, right? Here's plain.ts and plain.js. Oh, that's a problem. You see the problem? Capital P. Yeah, that's a problem. Locally, we don't care, but there we do. Let's rename this thing so it's capital P. That's all, because this is plain capital P. Yeah. So let's just rename this file. So, wow, what a bug. That's interesting. Okay, and that means we have to get rid of lowercase p, plain.js. So notice it didn't make new ones, right? But these ones are no good. So here's plain, and what I want to do is just to redo it. I want to just save it. We should transpile. Let's add a comment and take it away. So comments. Yeah, that's it. All right, that was weird. I didn't even anticipate that. And let's push it up to GitHub. Fixed plain bug. Fixed. Whoa, what happened here? Stage changes. These should be gotten rid of, right? I mean, it doesn't matter on a Windows machine. It doesn't matter, lowercase or uppercase doesn't matter, right? But maybe on up on GitHub, it does matter, right? Because GitHub uses like a Linux backend. So let's go fixed bug, right? Push. I'm just curious if this will actually do that change up online. So let's go to here. Where is GitHub? Here. That locally, that's local. And that's over here. Let's go back to the code. And yeah, fix the bug. And I'm just curious what it's going to look like. Objects. Yeah, okay, so player is here. And plain, what the heck? It's all lowercase. I wonder if it detected it as lowercase plane. I wonder if we can rename it here. File, find file. That is a real issue, guys. Total issue. Because, yeah, that is really weird. And why is it like this? Because, yeah, this should be capital P plane. That's right. Save changes, commit changes. We're going to pull it in a second. And same thing with objects. We're going to go to just checking something here. Yeah, this one should also be changed. So we'll just change it here on GitHub. So again, you can do that up here. It shouldn't make a difference locally. I'm just worried about remotely. Plain. Because some other operating systems are case sensitive and Windows is not. So that's weird. I've never done that before. At least I never had to. How about that? Not that plain map will matter, but whatever. It changes. Okay, so I've got a bunch of changes. I've got like these extra commits now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these changes down. So I'm going to go to here. And I'm going to go to control backtick and add another thing. I'm going to say get pull. Shouldn't really do anything. It just updates my plane to plane. That's all it does. So it didn't do anything of these. It just changed these to what they're supposed to be. But what it should do up online is it should not make it fail. That's the idea behind it. So if I go back to my commits and if I go back to this message and I go to details and I look at the code, then I should be able to play now. Yeah, see? Totally works online now. It was because of that silly change. So it's working online. Wow. I wonder it wasn't working before. All right, cool. So, yeah. So what I want to do now is I want to add in two things. I want to add an island and I want to add a cloud. Okay? An island and a cloud. So how does this work? Again, I need two game objects. Let's make the island first. So a new file. I'll call this island.ts. And it's very similar to the ocean. So let's copy the ocean for a second. Now, if someone said earlier to me one time, hey, if you're copy pasting, can't you make an object that's like inherits? Can't you inherit from the ocean in the island? I mean, the answer is you could. But the answer is you shouldn't, right? Because an island is not an ocean. You can't say it is a. It doesn't satisfy business rules, right? So you may want to create another game object that's between game object and ocean and island. Maybe something like scrollable game object or something like that that does some of the same things that these things do, right? However, I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to make it so that we can get going and then we can make another structure some other time. So here it's not ocean anymore, it's island. So it's very similar to an island. It has vertical speed, it has all this stuff. We're loading actually an island, but in order for us to do this step, we have to preload the island, which has not been done. Going down to game.ts, we need to add in a preloading step for island. So, right, this will be called island. And this will be island.png. Making sure that I think we killed the square brackets, which are totally okay. There we go. Hey, by the way, notice what we've done here. We have an asset manifest that has an array of ID sources. There's nothing wrong with making another class called item, asset item, right? And asset items have IDs, which are strings, and sources, which are strings. And then asset manifest can be of type item, and I can make new ones, and so on. Nothing wrong with doing those things. I'm just not going to do it here. It's just going to spin our wheels. I mean, I'm not going to reuse it for any other reason for now. All right, so island is here, and let's just be preemptive. I know I'm going to load a cloud, so let's load that in too. So we'll say island as well as cloud. We'll kind of preload those two things because we know we have islands and clouds. If you want to check that, you can see that in the assets folder Under images, we have an island. This is the island, and it's pretty sexy. And cloud, which is, oh, this is really nice, right? This cloud, it's not a nice cloud. But let's suppose, right? So we don't care about this. So here's island, and we're going to load up island. Here it is, right? Save that. And what island is going to do is exactly like what ocean does. It has check bounds, it has move, all this regular stuff, right? Vector speed 5, because it's going to be the same. Island has to move the same rate as the ocean. An island can't be faster than the ocean. It won't be an island anymore. It'll be a boat or something else, right? It has to move with the ocean. So it's exactly the same, except for when it resets. And also, the island can't just be this. I also need to make my island centered. The ocean is not centered by default. So here's where we can test on overloads. I can say that I want a new vector, right? Which is an empty vector of type 2, right? And I want this to be true. So that way it's just a different thing, right? Instead of me doing 0, 0, I can just do 2, vector 2. All right, so I'm testing both things now. I'm testing the vector class and the game object superclass. Right here, where I just did this. So it is centered. That's the difference between an island and an ocean. And when I reset, I don't want to reset to negative 960. I want to reset to a negative value that's outside of my stream, which is like the negative height, this dot height. So it's going to reset off screen this dot height. When I check bounds, I want to say that this dot y is greater than the screen height plus my height. So again, I can go config.game.screen height plus my height, this dot height, right? So the whole height off. So I can wait till the whole island leaves the screen before I reset. And that's it. That's the island, right? But there's a problem. The island's going to be coming down the same position every single time, right? My velocity is going to be what it is, and my position is going to be 0, 0, because that's what I made it up here, 0, 0, right? And I want the island to have some randomization, right? Now, we have some from your test, midterm test, in the math, under util, under mathf.ts, you can see that I have a random range function that generates a random number between minimum and maximum. So what I can do is inside of the island object, so let's go to the island object, when it resets, so here's my reset function, when it resets, I can generate a random x value. I can say that I can say let random x be equal to util.mathf.randomRange. And I want a random range from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. So the left side of the screen is 0, but I don't want my island to be half off the screen. I want to push it to the right half of width. So I'm going to say this dot half width, right? This dot half width. And then the right side is the length, the screen width, minus half width, right? So I can say that config.game.screen width, right, minus this dot half width, right, which is going to generate a number between the left side of the screen and the right side of the screen, minus the width, the offset of the size of my object. Because if I just do the left side of the screen and the right side of the screen, because my object is centered, half of my object is going to be off screen sometimes. I don't want that. So that's random x, and the random x value is going to be setting up my position. That's this part. Random x, right? So when it resets off screen at minus height and then some random position. Whew, that's all I need. And I have my island working now. Let's see how this works. So if I go back to my index.html, I got to add that in now because my island doesn't exist yet. My island has to be placed in here. So again, copy, paste. This will be island.js. Yeah. And now I can use it. I can go into my scene. I can go into my play scene. Here's my play scene. And if I scroll down, I can go to the the top where I have my plane, I can put in a private island. Wow, wouldn't I like a private island? Objects.island. That's nice, right? And I can instantiate an island just like I've done the plane. So I can say that underscore plane islands is equal to a new objects.island, right? That's nice. And then when I update, I can update my island. So this.island.update is what I want to do. So this.island.update. Okay. Now this is the trick. Where should I put my island? Should I pull it before the ocean? After the ocean? Before the plane? After the plane? What's the order? Should it be ocean, plane, island? Between them. Because of the painter's algorithm. We paint in layer order. So it should be this.addChilds, this.underscore island, and that should paint the island in the right place. Okay, so that should give us our island every frame. Let's check it out and see if it works. So again, we're going to go to this, and we're going to say go, and there you are. There's my little island. And you can see that I can go over here, and I can go over it, and I can go over here and chase it. And you can see it's got some pretty good variation in terms of randomization. So it looks like it's a different kind of island every time. Right? Different place. Now, they're not different islands. It'd be nice to have different island graphics where the island is slightly different every single time. It's a longer island, a smaller island, a bigger island, connected islands, whatever. But right now it's the same. All right, great. So now that we've done this, it's a great place to put it up on GitHub. We've changed these files. We'll say that added island to play scene. We'll also add all this into the staging area, and we'll click this little checkbox to git commit, and then we'll push this up to our repository. And unfortunately, it won't be instant. It won't be instant, although I'd like to think that this would be automatically updated. However, I don't expect that it's going to be, so you're not going to see an island yet. Why is that? Because it takes a few moments for it to propagate and to have this work. Other things to check are, do we have an error? I think that's the most important part. We don't. It just hasn't propagated yet, like we talked about before. So it's going to. It's just going to take a little bit of time. All right, we've got our island done, and guess what? Our cloud is very similar to our island, except a couple things. One, here's my plan for the cloud. One, the cloud has to be semi-transparent, 50%, let's say, transparent. Second thing is, the cloud is going to have variable speed. Some clouds are going to be faster, some clouds are going to be slower. Some clouds are going to drift to the right, some clouds are going to drift to the left, right? Some clouds are going to start higher, some clouds are going to start a little lower. So they're not all together, all at the same time. So let's make a cloud class. Same thing. And then we'll maybe we'll take a short break before we finish. So we'll make this cloud.ts. And again, I can just go into the island. So we'll go back to the island class that we made already. Here's our island. Copy everything. It's like the island. It's like the ocean. Again, it's screaming for it to have a superclass. I'm not going to do it right now because we're going to continue to develop cloud. Here's our cloud. So we want both vertical speed and horizontal speed. So I want this too. So horizontal speed. Okay, so there's my horizontal speed and vertical speed. I want to start a cloud, not an island, right? And this is correct. This is correct so far. This is not correct, right? I'm not going to do this every time on start. I want to do this on reset now. So this is going to move on reset. So on reset, I'm going to get a vertical speed, and my vertical speed is also going to be randomized. It's going to use util.mathf.randomRange between 5, let's say, and 10. So it could be as slow as the island or twice as fast. Okay? And then we want to do this underscore horizontal speed, which is also a util.mathf.randomRange. And I want to do from a -2 to a 2. So I'm going to drift -2 to the left or +2 to the right. right? And then instead of it being a velocity of just vertical speed, we can just add in the horizontal speed as well. Okay, so the horizontal speed and vertical speed to give us our velocity. Okay, and that's random x. I also want to give a random y value. Instead of it being always negative height, one height. Why is this? Because for our island, it's okay. Because we only have one island. But we're going to have many clouds. So imagine when we first start our game, all the clouds are going to be at the top of the screen. The exact same y coordinate. X coordinate might be different, but the y coordinate is going to be the exact same. I want them to be staggered a little bit, right? So they're not all starting together. So in order for me to do that, I need a random y value as well. So I'll say that, okay, let's random y is equal to util.mathf.randomRange. And I'll say that the minimum is going to be negative this height. Actually, negative this dot height times 3, let's say. So 3 times the height, far higher, way up above the screen. And then the maximum is going to be negative this dot height. So I have to do it this way because this dot height is actually greater than 3 times of the negative number, right? So that's why this has to be the way it is. And instead of my random y being going to waste, I'm going to change this to random y. There. That is the cloud. Is that all I need? Let's take a look. So my cloud, I check bounds, I move my cloud every frame and move and check bounds. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's that simple. It's pretty simple. A couple of things I want to do for yeah.
I'm a little bit confused about the property height and width.
Sure.
That can refer to the screen or to the object in this case. But because if you say this dot height, right?
Yes.
That's to refer to the
Object.
to the object.
Yeah, so the height, let's say for example the height is 60 pixels, right? That means the x coordinate is going to be minus 60 times 3 minus 180 outside of the screen. Or
But in that time, the position is 0, right?
the position is my position right now is going to be created, a new position.
Based on height.
But the height is going to, remember, my height is a number, right? My height is like, let's say 60, let's just say, right? So if my height is 60 and I want to make it go off screen, negative height, negative 60. So it's off screen, the whole height off screen, right? If I only make it the same number, negative height, that means always going to start off just off screen. But I want it to be staggered. I don't want it to be the same place every time when it resets. I want to be, sometimes it's going to be here, sometimes it's going to be here, sometimes it's going to reset, but this is the top of the screen. It can reset somewhere up here, somewhere, but not here all the time. Because if it always resets here, that means there's a chance that the clouds will come down together. And that doesn't make sense. It doesn't look good, right? That's why I'm doing it this way. There is a bit of a flaw. There is a bit of a flaw to this thing, right? But we'll talk about this later. So, okay, so again, so this what this does. Let's see how it works, right? Does it work? Again, in order for me to make my cloud come into play, I need to go down here and in my index.html, I need to add a cloud object, right? Because I don't have a cloud object. I just have island. So here's cloud. Okay. Cloud.js. So now that I have it, I can attach it to my play scene. So in my play scene, just like before. But I mean, I'm going to just put one cloud in play right now. So cloud, right, is of type objects.cloud, right? I can do that. And I can go through and do the same thing I did before with this part. I'm just going to separate it because this is not the final version. Cloud. And this is going to be cloud. And you know what? I'm going to update my cloud. Right? And I'm also going to add my cloud above my plane. Right? Should be above the plane. Ow. Ow, ow. Is what I want to add, child. right? And I said that I want to make my cloud also semi-transparent. I haven't had a chance to do that. Let's do that with my cloud. And the way I would probably do that here in my start function, something like this dot alpha is equal to 0.5. Oh, man, which is like 50% transparent, right? So each cloud is 50% transparent. And then when I play this thing now locally, then you can see that I got a cloud probably, right? There it is. Some faster ones, some slower ones, some going to the right, some going to the left. Looks pretty good. Okay, there's only one cloud. Some good variation is what I'm saying. Okay? Cool, but I want to add more than one. More than one, right? And sure, I could do cloud 1, cloud 2, cloud 3, cloud 4, but that is terrible, right? I want to do a cloud array of clouds, an array of game objects. That's what I want. And the way to do that would be, I want to make something called underscore clouds, the clouds array, which is going to be an object.cloud array. That's what it is. Or you can also cast this differently. You can say that this is an array of objects.cloud. That's also doable completely. You can also make it like this. Okay? I personally like this version. Okay? It's more it's explicit. It talks about what it is, right? It's an array of objects.cloud. Okay? The angle brackets means the type. Okay? Both are correct. Now we have some issues. We can't just make a cloud. We have to do a couple things first. One, we have to instantiate the array first. So we have to say something like, so we have to create the cloud array. That's what we have to do, which is this underscore clouds is equal to a new array of type clouds. Objects.cloud. Right? Wow, I hate when it does that. It's trying to help me, but it's hurting me. Okay, make sense? So that's what this does. So that's going to be an instantiate a new cloud array. It's empty right now. It just makes an empty container, right? So this is an empty container. Empty container. There's nothing inside of it, right? And then I need to build my cloud array up, and I need to do that by a number of clouds I want. Well, what if I want 3 clouds? For now, maybe that's okay. But I don't want to store it here and hard code it. I want to store it somewhere else. So maybe inside the config somewhere. So my config. Maybe in the config, I can say that I have a cloud number. Public static cloud num. Let's just make it, it's a number, and it's going to be equal to 3 for now. Okay? And if that's the case, then I can simply say that we'll do a for loop for index to config game cloud num, right? If it's less than that, then what I can do is that I can say that let's add, right, another cloud to the array. So I can say this dot underscore clouds. And you can say I can push or pop. I can push a new cloud. So I can say a new objects.cloud. Yeah? Can I do that? Because remember that, this is a great thing. Remember that in JavaScript, array is not just an array. An array is many things. An array is an array list. An array is an associative array. An array is so many things. So it acts like an array, and it also acts like a list. That's why we can use push, and we can use pop. Okay? So that's what this does. So we added a cloud to the array, and it instantiates a new cloud. So we're instantiating cloud num clouds, right? However cloud nums I have, whatever the cloud num is. And then here, instead of updating one cloud, we have to make a for each or something like that. There's 2 or 3 different for each loops. We can use the classic for each. This is the old style for each, where we can say that this._clouds, and then for each cloud in clouds, then we can say that cloud dot update. Right? We can say that. That's one way of doing it. We can also use the other for each. I'll use that down here just for demo purposes, where I want to add this to the list. I can say that there's for in and a for of. So for of is like the same thing. It's for every cloud in the this._clouds. It looks a little different, but the effect will be the same. There we go. For every cloud in clouds. Right? So 2 different ways of doing a for each loop in this case. Both have slightly different effects. One is using a lambda expression. Here, again, it's not a lambda. It's actually a fat arrow function that's built into ECMAScript 6, right? You can rewrite this to make it look different. So it's, instead of this, it's a function that takes a cloud. So it looks like this. Okay, that's how you can write it the old way. Or it's better to write it this way. That's the new way. Fat arrow. Okay? Make sense? So this should show us more than one cloud. Let's see how this works. So again, if I go back and if I start, you can see that we should see like 3 clouds now. And you can see that there's a little bit of variation of when they start, which gives the player a chance to survive somehow. Otherwise, the player would not be able to survive this onslaught of clouds. Even now, it's pretty difficult with the way we've decided to move. If I'm just trying to avoid the clouds by just moving my mouse away, it can be very challenging. Right? You can see that that's quite fun, actually. Right? So we can kind of do that. A couple of things we're not doing. We're not pointing to where my mouse is moving. I mean, there's a lot of little effects we can make, so we can make this game a little bit more interesting. But for now, we have a lot of what the game is about. Okay? All right, we're going to stop recording now and take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about collision detection. And how do we do collision detection? Because we need that for your next part of your assignment, right? So let's stop this and take a short break. And I'll put this up on GitHub. So again, let's end the stream.